All right, welcome to another episode of Melanated Spark Podcast. I am your host, Verlaine Quinney, and today I have author Cece Dawson with me, so we get to sit down and talk with her. Hey, Cece, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. Before we get into our icebreakers, I want you to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay. As you said, I am Cece Dawson. I am an author. I am an entrepreneur, and I am a mental health advocate. I'm a New York native. I enjoy archery, axe throwing, and glass blowing.
Yes, I love those. Okay, we'll have to talk a little bit about that as well.
Okay.
So, and I'm also from New York. I'm from Buffalo, though. What part of New York are you from?
Oh, I'm like New York City.
Oh my God. That's how New Yorkers always separate us.
Mm-hmm.
I'm from the real New York, y'all.
Like technically you're upstate.
See, don't do that. See,
it's all love. It's all love though. It's fine. It's all love.
All right, so let's get into some icebreakers. The first question, I have 3.
Okay.
So the first question is, what is something on your bucket list?
Something on my bucket list. I have so many things on my bucket list. One of the things I wanted to see was Mount Everest. Like, don't get me wrong, I don't want to climb Mount Everest out of fear, but I just want to marvel in something majestic. And why not marvel at the highest peak in the world?
That actually sounds really nice. It sounds relaxing too. Just thinking of the scenery. That sounds nice.
Okay. I just want to look up, take a look around, maybe just go to the very first bottom summit, and that's it.
I was just going to say, I think you should hike it, like, if you got there, just a little bit, not all the way up, but, just a little bit.
Right. Just enough where I can still wear my Timbs. Okay.
Exactly. Okay, next question. If you could change anything in the world, what would it be?
I know a lot of people would say poverty and things of that nature, but racism. For me, racism is just outweighing the poverty guidelines because, if it wasn't for racism, I don't believe poverty would really exist. A lot of disparities wouldn't exist between communities. So I would get rid of racism.
I agree. A lot of things are stem from racism. So
exactly.
That's true. Exactly. Okay. Question 3. If you could be any flavor of ice cream, what would it be and why?
I'm gonna have to go with my favorite, Rocky Road. That's because it comes with a lot of different elements, and sometimes you could just bite in a nut or a marshmallow. You never know what you're gonna get.
Okay, I like that answer. Yes, I love it.
Thank you.
All right, so let's get into learning a little bit more about you, about your book, how you got to where you are today. So let's start kind of from the beginning a little bit. How did you get to where you are today? What kind of influenced you to become an author? Let's back it up a little bit.
Okay. So I just want to say that I never aspired to be an author. I'm just a firm believer. If you follow your passions, it will lead you in the right direction. And it led me in the direction of being an author. I've been writing for over 15 years and not actually like writing to the point where my stuff is being published, but just having a composition notebook. I remember I used to carry a composition notebook to every class. And I will write short stories and poems and ideas. So I've always been a writer, and it's always been my outlet. I've always been passionate about it. So that's how I started writing. But how I got into sci-fi is vastly different. I was a big Harry Potter fan and Star Wars and Lord of the Rings. So for me, I was always into fantasy and, sci-fi and wanting to be a part of that world. So as a child, you don't notice those things. You're into the glitz and glams and the wands and all of that. And not that there's anything wrong with those things. I quite enjoyed it, and I still do. However, as an adult, I do notice that there is not enough representation in those films that I love so much. Yeah. And I have a 4-year-old little girl. And for me, it's very important to kind of break whatever chain that I was a part of. So if I know I didn't have the correct representation, That's something I want to change, not just for myself, but for my daughter and future generations. Because, you know, growing up, I had Pocahontas and Jasmine. That was the closest thing I got to an African-American princess growing up.
Yeah.
I didn't have that luxury. You know,
Yeah.
thankfully, it's becoming more, you know, open now, but it's not open enough. And if I can't get people to change it, why not change it myself? So that's how that all started.
So that brings up a great question too, because like you said, you don't really see African Americans in the sci-fi realm, authors in that realm. So how, even though that's kind of a passion of yours, how did you break into creating a whole book around that, like finding the publisher to support, and how did that go about?
So mental health is a very big thing for me. That was prior to even me writing, which is why I went to school. I got my degree in psychology because I wanted to be able to help heal my community. That was a big deal for me. And it wasn't until I was writing the book somewhat, but I really didn't get into it until I got into the pandemic, because I used to work in a hospital. And as you know, health workers were frontline. We had to still be out. So I remember the day of lockdown, and I still had to go out the following day and the streets were deserted. So it was one of the scariest. It was something out of a movie like World War Z. I was terrified. We didn't know how you could catch it. We didn't know anything about this virus when it first hit. So when I was going to work, I kind of just like tuned out, and, you know, during my lunch breaks, I just kind of like focused on my book and, you know, think like that and just use that. And then like when I left, you know, from work, I was like, okay, I had a couple of days at work and I'll jot them down. And then slowly but surely the book started to come alive. And then I was able to like delve into these characters and kind of just create a whole new world by, you know, just like I said, just diving in, because for me, it was just so hard to be able to be around my family and not know if I'm bringing something home that was going to make them sick. Yeah. So it helped me not be in a negative space, if you will. It helped me just kind of refocus and just go into these characters, give them a voice, and just recreate the world. And upon doing so, I met a young lady, her name is Danielle, and she was able to help me try to, you know, get my voice out into the world, because as you know, sci-fi and being an African-American woman, that's not something easy. That's a lane that's not occupied by many. Right. So she's assisting me in being able to do that. So that's how everything came about.
That is awesome. So, okay, so you're an author and you said you work in healthcare, correct?
Yeah, I used to work in healthcare. I don't work in healthcare anymore. Now, I do more of the guidelines of mental health.
Okay. So I want to get into what the book is about too, but I'm trying to like lead up to how we got into the book, right?
Take your time.
So in your experience, especially since you said a lot of your writing was taking place while you were in the hospital during basically the pandemic, did any of that kind of influence like the stories and things like that that are being told in the book, since it is like sci-fi as well?
Believe it or not, no. The hospital environment didn't inspire me, I should say, and really didn't encourage me as much as New York did. Because it takes place in New York. So I guess because I was feeling a little low and I really, really wasn't feeling my normal self, I thought about home, and home just makes me feel good because it's kind of like my anchor. I currently live in Virginia, and I love Virginia. I really love Virginia. You know, it's just a nice change of pace, and I could raise my daughter, you know, without all the hustle and bustle. Yeah. But there's just something different about home that kind of hits me different. And that's why my story takes place in New York, because it's just always a reminder that's always going to be home for me. I was raised there, born there. So yeah, that's what it was for me, New York.
What other aspects about New York influenced the book? Like what specifically were like everything you said?
Down to the subway station, down to the store when the guy's just kind of like being rude and brushing people off, to cabs, you name it. New York is a heavy presence in our book. Heavy presence.
Okay, so let's get into what is your book about? Let's talk about this. What is this book about?
Okay, so the book is about a military experiment gone wrong.
Okay.
And so pretty much
Very realistic.
yes, very realistic military experiment gone wrong. And pretty much we kind of get into the story. The military experiment gone wrong, and it's called Integrated Animal Unit. It's a new unit in military. And what happened is scientists found that there's 4 specific animals that can be integrated with human DNA, hence integrated animal unit. And depending on your personality and, you know, kind of who you are, depends on which animal you're going to bond with. So it's not like anything like Animorphs where you're turning into the animal, but you do get specific qualities and abilities based off of the animal that's bonded with you. Once that happens, you turn into what we call a phaser. You'll be able to phase. There's a reason for that, but you have to read the book to find out why.
Okay, I'm like, what?
And so we followed this minority group of phasers, and there's one young lady. Her name is Cleo. She's the main character, Cleo Hurston, and she's an African-American lead. And we follow her journey on being a part of a group she's really not a part of, being a part of a world that's not very welcoming to her, if that sounds familiar.
I was just going to say, sounds very familiar. Okay.
So a lot of taboo topics we talk about using the vehicle of sci-fi to deliver. So we follow her on this journey of, you know, life and, you know, expectations and things through her eyes, not just as an African-American woman, but just someone as a woman, period, not being welcomed by her community and how that makes her feel. And, you know, how she overcomes it as well.
That sounds interesting. That sounds really exciting too.
I love it.
So you combine a little bit of the racism, a little bit of the sexism. Is there any other like topics in this book people can kind of expect to get like a little piece of?
Yes, of course. So you hit it right on the head. So racism, sexism, mental health. Mental health is a big thing in my book. And like I said, I support mental health. I'm a super mental health advocate. And Evie pretty much covers that. She's Cleo's best friend. And we go on a journey with her because she's born with a birth defect.
Okay.
And how she feels about being ostracized by her community because of that. So, and, you know, we have the LGBTQ community in there, and how, you know, as a Black person being part of that community, how it's, you know, how that person's affected as well. Her name is Jasmine. So we talk about different walks of life. We talk about sexism. We talk about racism. We talk about mental health. We talk about interracial dating. And that was a big one for me because, you know, I love Black love. But I also wanted to bring the forefront of interracial dating to the table because one of the prime examples I use is, do you ever notice, for example, Kanye West, when he was dating Kim Kardashian, he got applauded around the world because she was considered to be bad. And don't get me wrong, she's absolutely gorgeous. I think Kim Kardashian is gorgeous. But why is it, now it's just a question, because I'm super big on diversity. My book is full of diverse characters. However, I want to know, and I want to ask that question and push that button. Why is it okay for Kanye West to get applauded and Serena Williams to get dumped on and dragged through the mud because she married a Caucasian man?
Yeah, that's a lot of those double standards.
Absolutely. Because I feel that Black women are the most disrespected people in the world. We can't get away with anything. We always have to be strong. We always have to be, stand firm. We can't be weak. We can't
sense of like perfection, kind of.
We can't get away with nothing else. Nobody else can get away with. And I just wanted to talk about that buzzword, interracial relationship. Like that's a buzz because it still makes people uncomfortable. But why is it when women do it, Black women do it, is uncomfortable, but when a Black man does it, it's not quite as uncomfortable? Like the basketball players, Tiger Woods. Think about all those people.
Yeah,
they don't catch half as much flack as an African American
Black woman does it. Yeah, that's definitely true. That's definitely true.
So I want to talk about it. I want to talk about mental health. I want to talk about racism. I want to talk about sexism. I want to talk about it all.
I think that's really cool because sometimes, like you said, a lot of those topics are very uncomfortable for people. shouldn't be, but it is. And the fact that you're able to integrate it into your book and it be within, the genre of sci-fi and still making it exciting, I think the big plus with, and, I see it all the time, like with creatives and people within the genres to be more creative, the way you guys can present topics. And I think people see it with one lens, but then if you actually dig a little deeper, you're like, oh, I see these things every day, but why do I understand it when I see it?
Right.
It doesn't feel like reality versus in my own reality, I don't see it with the same lens. I think it's so interesting. But I think it's really cool that you guys are able to do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
And bring those discussion points out for people to start having those conversations around those topics.
I also just want to bring awareness and perspective. And that's why it's so important for me that no matter who reads the book, it's just a matter of them feeling included in the book. And that's why I like, taking topics of reality and weave it through my sci-fi, because that means anybody can relate to the book.
Yeah,
of course you can
look
look at this world, but these characters just seem more authentic in my eyes when they're dealing with real life things. And you're putting it on a sci-fi platform. It's just like, wow, like I get that. Like I could so relate to that.
Yeah, that's super cool. It is. So are any of your stories based off of your real life experience? Are any of them?
Oh my goodness. Yes. I will say yes.
The pause. Okay.
Because when you read the book, you go like, oh,
that's what she was talking about. Okay.
That's what was okay. And you'll know which ones I'm talking about because they don't seem like the most realistic thing. Like, okay, I don't have animal DNA in me, but
I'm like intrigued. Okay.
Be like that. How can that? Huh? Yeah.
I'm excited. I'm like, okay, I need to read this now. We have a book club, and so we like to switch up the genre. So this is something that I definitely want to suggest. I think this sounds like it will be definitely a fun read. It'll be a change of pace. Is it an audiobook by any chance? I like that.
So we will be doing audiobook, and audiobook probably won't be ready towards like the end of November.
That's perfect then. Okay. So yeah, keep me posted on when that's available too, because it's always, for our book club, it's always great if we can have both options.
Yes.
Because a lot of us do a little bit of both, so it would be great if have both options as well.
I will definitely let you know.
Yes, and then we can have a chat with the author herself.
Right.
After we read the book, so that would be great.
Oh, that's exciting.
Okay, so let's move into your spark, okay, and how you are impacting, your community, your readers. What is some of the feedback you've received from your book, and how are your stories and this book impacting your readers?
Oh my goodness. So it's very humbling. First, let me say it's very humbling, and I'm excited because each person that I speak to or even interview with that kind of got a snippet of the book, they're just like, wow, first of all, we want to thank you. And I'm just like, thank me for what? It was like, just, bringing these topics to the forefront and being, a flag holder and trying to make space in a lane that's really not occupied by many of us, because not many African-American women write sci-fi. That's not really a lane that's represented by us. There's a handful of us in the compared to how many there actually are. So, and the fact that I'm writing about a LGBTQ member that's a supporting character in sci-fi, it's just a different dynamic. Racism, bringing that to the forefront and just having that open discussion. It's, and I don't understand why people shy away from it. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Maybe if we could talk about it, we can heal from it. There's no need to be fearful of having a discussion on why, I feel the way I feel, and why we just both can't have our feelings about it, but try to move forward in a collective manner for our generation purposes, for our children.
Yeah, and it takes time. You know, it definitely takes time, but we have to start not just having the conversations, but like you said, healing from, you know, past traumas, recognizing that it is an issue, before we can, you know, continue to move forward. I think also people are tired of just conversations and they want action. But I think around topics around that, sometimes, like you said, we have to spread the awareness, because a lot of people are just ignorant to it. They just don't know that that's even what it's called, you know, that's what they're demonstrating. They just don't know.
Exactly. And that's why part of me doing something about it was, one, getting my degree and being able to help my community heal and grow from whatever trauma they're going through. That I feel like that responsibility also fell on me, because heaven forbid, when I'm dead and gone, I'm going to be considered the ancestors our children call upon, and vice versa. You get what I'm saying?
Yes. So I've never thought of it like that. And you need to be healed if somebody is calling upon you.
Right. So for me, that's how I look at it. Like, one day, just how we call our ancestors and we call out for our mothers in time of need.
Yes.
One day, my children's children and whoever will call upon me to help for whatever. So I want to make sure that I'm doing whatever I can to help build my community and give back to my community. And also, for those who aren't a part of my community, help educate. Education is also a part of the process. Like you said, discussions is one thing, but educating people is a big part of that. And that's kind of what my book represents. When you read the book, it's a fun story. It's not just blaming your face. Don't get me wrong. It's a fun sci-fi story, and it's not like pertinent, like right then and there. But the more you read from her perspective, I want people to just take a moment and say, you walked a little bit in her shoes. This is kind of what we go through on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
It's just, I want to planting the seed, and then maybe future generations might help it grow into something more beautiful. But I at least have to try.
I love that. Are you planning to do any other books?
Yes.
Okay.
So this book is going to be a trilogy, and I'm actually working on space opera.
That is super cool. Okay, so break that down. What does that mean? Break that down first. What does that mean?
What, a space opera?
Yeah.
Okay, so Star Wars, for example, space opera is not what you think, like an opera and singing, but almost like a soap opera. Just very drama filled, happens in space. So
that's super cool.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, that's super cool. I don't think I've ever heard of that. I see, when you said space opera, I was like, oh, okay, this is gonna be singing. This is gonna come to life on video.
No singing.
Okay, that's cool. So what are kind of the plans for that? Is that going to be coming like in the next couple years? Is it going to be 10 years? What's the plan? Okay, what's the future look like?
Probably in a few years, because I'm still working on the Chronicles of Recreation and finishing that story. So I think once I'm able to finish that story and close those characters out, then I'll probably be able to work on a little bit more. But every now and again, I get ideas and stuff like that, and I'm able to jot it down.
How do you know when the character is complete and the book is complete and ready for the next one? How do you determine that?
So the first book is left on a cliffhanger. Okay. The second book, I'm almost done with. I'm not ready yet. It doesn't feel ready. You'll know when it's time. Okay. It doesn't feel ready at all.
I do want to ask too, just being an author, in case there's any listeners that are thinking about publishing, can you kind of just walk us through kind of the steps really quickly in terms of what you went through in your process to get your book published?
Well, I can't discuss too much in regards to my process because I'm still doing contracts.
Okay.
And paperwork. But what I will say is definitely from two different perspectives. If you're going to self-publish, do your research. And the biggest thing is editing. Make sure you get a great editor. If you don't get anything else, you can always create your cover on Canva, all of that. Editing and research. If you're going to do traditional publishing, do your research on the companies you want to submit to and make sure you have a stellar query letter.
Okay.
Because that's what kind of gets you in the door.
Is that like an introduction of like who you are
query
and stuff?
letter
Okay.
pretty much lets them know who you are, a little bit about the book, and what you're willing to do to push your book as well. It, tells your word count and, what, like I said, what the book is about, and pretty much, your perspective on why you should be the chosen one. It's almost like your resume, basically, for your book.
Okay.
So make sure you have a stellar query letter, and make sure you turn in your best edited version of the book. So it goes back to, on both sides, research, editing. Those things are going to save you from vanity press, which means vanity press are pretty much people that take your money and take your book, essentially.
Okay.
They take your money and don't do nothing for you. So people are like, oh, I can publish your book for you, no problem. Be very wary of that.
And that's what you mean by doing your research, to know who you're giving your stuff. Okay.
Absolutely. Like, it looks all good on the outside. Please, 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 please. Because I know too many people who have gotten caught in situations like that and have lost their works because of it. Be very careful. Wow.
So when that happens, they like have your book and they like try and sell it themselves, or what do you mean they lost their works?
It really depends on what kind of press you get. Sometimes what they'll do is they'll say, oh, I'll copyright it for you. You don't have to worry about this. I'll get your SBN. And the entire copyright will be under their name.
Oh, so then they have the rights.
So they have.
Okay.
So people get confused sometimes. So let's say, for example, my name is on the copyright, but somebody's under writing permissions. What you need to do is now you need to write down in a contract what rights and permissions that person has.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Versus it being, versus someone saying they're the claimant, the author, and has your writing permissions.
Wow.
That's a different story versus someone saying rights and permissions. You can dictate in the contract what kind of rights and permissions someone has.
Okay.
But you can't do it if that person is the author, claiming that they're the author as well as the claimant.
Wow. I would be hot. I would be hot. A lot of people,
and that's what, I have a lot of friends and that's what they told me. Rights and permissions, a lot of people lose their books to rights and permissions because they give away exclusive rights and permissions. Exclusive means full control over your works, which is something you never want to do. You don't want to give somebody exclusive rights over your works. Normally, traditional publishing will do that because they're paying you on the front end.
Okay.
So they're trying to recoup their money on the back end, and you can put in your contract exclusive rights for 5 years, which means they're the only ones that can publish your works for 5 years. Then upon that, they're going to return a book to you.
Okay.
You have to stipulate what you want in the contract. Contracts are so important. Stipulate what you want in the contract.
That's good to know. I did not know that. That's good to know.
Write down your rights and permissions. Say you can either have exclusive right for a year or non-exclusive rights, which means other people can utilize your work as well.
Okay. And that's the traditional publishing route you were saying.
Traditional publishing is a little bit harder to wiggle because again, they're paying you like almost $100,000 upfront for like a 3-book deal.
Okay.
So that plays a little bit differently versus you either self-publishing or doing, a publisher that you pay, you give money to, and they publish your works for you.
Okay.
That's what I mean for like the self-publishers. They have to be very wary in regards to contract. You get an invoice, make sure it lists everything that you are going to receive.
Okay. That's good to know. That I would hate for people to go through that process. And especially if it takes people longer to write, then you are basically kind of at the finish line, then to have to deal with that's terrible.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. So is there any other way people can like stay connected with you and like your books and like do you have your own community that people can, kind of follow along and stay engaged with you?
Yes, that's an excellent question. So my website is www.authorcecedawson.com. And it's actually a phaser quiz that they can take. So if they type in www.author.cc.dawson phaser quiz, it should come up. You can actually take a quiz to see what faction you belong to. Once you do that, yep, there's a Facebook page called The Chronicles of Brute Creation Phasers, where all the phasers right now are at, and they're like hanging out, and they're hanging out with their faction. So it's pretty cool. On Instagram, it is author Cece Dawson, TikTok, author Cece Dawson, Twitter, author Cece Dawson.
Awesome. Across the board.
Across the board.
My last question is going to be, how has writing this book been life-changing for you?
I didn't realize how important the book was until I started getting feedback from the book, especially from my community. And they were like, I love this. I love this, and we need this. And that just makes me feel good as a person to be able to bring something like that. So knowing that I'm changing one or two lives for me it feels so good. And it's an overwhelming experience knowing that I'm leaving my legacy behind, and then my daughter can pick up the mantle and take it from there.
Yes.
And that fills me with so much awe. And, it's indescribable, to be honest with you. I feel really good, like, that I'm doing this and leaving something behind.
Yes, I felt that. I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for today and sitting down and allowing us to learn a little bit more about you, about your book. Tell us again the name of your book, and really quickly how people can get in contact with you one more time.
Oh, okay.
One more time.
So my book is called The Chronicles of Brute Creations. Pre-order available on Amazon.com. It releases October 31st, but I will go ahead and just pre-order it now. All my social media websites, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook is author Cece Dawson, and my website is www.authorccdawson.com.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Great questions. Great interview. I loved it.
Yay, I'm so glad. I'm so glad. I love the energy. This worked so well. I felt it.
Awesome. I'm like, tripping over words and everything like that. I'm just like, okay, I got this.
You're doing fabulous. Fabulous, fabulous.